Hey everybody, it's Eddie from Tokyo, and this video is very special for, well, lots of reasons, but especially if you hold the digital asset XRP. First, we're going to talk about expansion. The interoperability is key to that expansion. Cross-chain is critical for any blockchain to have staying power. Secondly, real-world asset. This is the tokenization of everything because everything is going to be tokenized. And third, to be a serious participant in DeFi, that would be the decentralized finance, you need to go where the aggregated liquidity is and where the users are all coming to a hub. These topics are discussed, including security, Chainlink, and AI. The first 4 minutes is a fascinating bio, which I shared on X. So if you already saw that and you get into the video and you say, oh, I've already seen this, well, just skip that first 4 minutes and 30 more minutes of an interview, which is original content and captured just a couple of days ago, is about to unfold. Do enjoy. Tell everyone a little bit about your background, because the first time I heard the story, I thought it was fascinating.
Maybe we can go back to my high school years where everything started for me. I am from Greece originally, and back around the equivalent of 10th grade, I started doing a lot of math by myself. Right? I always wanted to do something. I was looking for an opportunity to also leave Greece, travel the world, and I got fascinated by math. They gave us a book at school in 10th grade. I started reading it and I'm like, okay, you can sit in a room and just think about a problem and do something in your head that no one else in the world can do. And that's when I decided, okay, that's what I want to do. I spent the next 2 years studying by myself, pretty much 16 hours a day. That's all I was thinking about, even when I was at school or like walking around, I would just think about math. And I went to a pretty good level, like from a pretty low level. That's when I realized also that if you really put your mind to something and you work on it consistently, you can improve really fast. And that's something we forget today, where everything seems to be happening so fast. Like, on the internet, there's so many distractions. People sometimes forget, and even I forget, that if you sit down and for a month really commit yourself to something, you can really get at a pretty decent level at anything, right? I'm a really big believer that, of course, talent is important, natural ability is important, but it's much more important to commit yourself to something and really try to improve, but you have to be passionate, right? It cannot happen without passion. So long story short, spent 2 years studying math by myself in Greece. I ended up becoming the first Greek student to win a gold medal at the International Math Olympiad, for those of you who are familiar with high school math competitions. Then I got accepted into MIT, where I started working with Silvio Micali, who is the founder of Algorand. And at some point, Silvio liked my research. He was like, I have this problem I'm working on. It's a new blockchain. It's called Algorand. He was working at the time with my co-founder now at AXELAR, Sergey. It was just the two of them. And the problem they were solving is banking the unbanked, right? And allowing everyone in the world to hold money, sound money in their smartphone, right? Because there's so many people in the world that don't have access to a bank account, but apparently everyone has a smartphone. And myself being from Greece at the time, it really made sense because of the financial crisis. People could not get money out of the bank. I could not transact with my family. It was pretty much impossible at the time to send the remittances back and forth. I was in Boston. So I got fascinated by the problem. It had a real world impact. Of course, at the time, I knew nothing about business or anything like that. I was just a researcher, but I'm like, let me take this opportunity. And we worked on Algorand for a couple of years, where we built one of the first proof of stake networks in the space. My personal contribution there was designing the consensus protocol, which was one of the first proof of stake consensus protocols in the space. My co-founder, Sergey, also has done foundational research in the space. Not that many people know, but he is the one who led the standardization of BLS signatures. BLS signatures are used on the Ethereum blockchain today for validators to vote on the blocks and secure the network, right? So he's done, I mean, Sergey is wonderful. He's done so much research in cryptography, and he's also a professor at the University of Waterloo at the same time. And then fast forward a few more years, when we launched Algorand, we realized that you had to onboard liquidity and users to a new chain. And that's really how the idea for AXELAR came about. It's like, well, why build interoperability for a particular ecosystem? The world is going to be multi-chain. I personally believe there's going to be more than 1 million chains for reasons I'm happy to go into. And in such a multi-chain world, you need infrastructure to connect the various blockchains, right? Simply put, it's like the internet for blockchains. If you think of every single blockchain as a computer, you need interoperability technology or the internet to connect those computers, allow people to move assets or transact across different networks. And that's how we got started with AXELAR.
And I know that this big integration with the ledger is going to open up so many new doors for developers and for all participants, actually. I know that there are two ways that the XRP can flow. You have this lock and mint mechanism, and then you also have squid. And not to get too deep into the weeds of the technicals, but I think knowing that you have two different ways to move XRP, and why are there two different ways, and what those advantages are for when that becomes live for everyone in the space. I think that's important if we can talk about that.
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. The most widely used use case for interoperability technologies moving assets around, because after all, tokenization is a very big use case. And asset transfers come in two flavors, right? The first one, as you mentioned, is minting and burning. So as an example, XRPL EVM side chain is launching. It's a new chain and it's going to have compatibility with the EVM. XRP is not available on this chain. So if you want to create a representation of XRP on that chain so that people can take loans on that chain or that people can pay gas, right? XRP is going to be the gas token for the EVM chain. How do you do it? Well, with the AXELAR infrastructure, we enable the issuer of an asset to create a representation of the asset on a new chain by locking part of the supply on the XRPL side. The supply is going to be secured by AXELAR's decentralized validator set, and the validators collectively authorize mints on the other side. So Eri, as a user, if you want to send 3 XRP on the XRPL, the validators are going to attest to the message and say, okay, Eri, we're going to give you a representation of the asset on the EVM, which you can later burn to get your XRP back on XRPL, right? So that's number one. There's no consensus terminology for those things. You know, people used to call them wrapped assets. Then people didn't like this terminology. They call it mint and burn. But effectively, you're just creating a representation of the asset that did not exist before. So that's number one. Number two would be the swaps, which is what Squid is facilitating, as you mentioned. And this is the equivalent of a decentralized exchange, right? There is one on the XRP. There is Uniswap on Ethereum. Squid does the same thing cross-chain, where if you have a user on Ethereum and they hold ETH and they want to onboard to XRPL or the XRPL EVM and get XRP, Squid can facilitate this flow. They work with market makers under the hood, where you send some funds on the origin chain and the market maker especially gives you a quote. And if the quote is good, they fill on the destination chain. And you can also route through existing DEXs, right? You can route through a decentralized exchange on Ethereum. You can route through a decentralized exchange on XRPL to tap into liquidity that exists in various chains, right? But I'd say if we had to make an analogy and just simplify the two flows, the minting and burning is more like sending an asset within the XRPL. The cross-chain swaps are more equivalent to just doing a swap on a decentralized exchange, right? If we had to make an analogy with a single chain flow.
Will the RLUSD also be one of those assets that can be utilized in that swap mechanism?
Any asset.
Any asset.
This applies to any asset, as long as this is supported by some market maker or there is some liquidity on a decentralized exchange, any asset can be supported, right? And Squid, I believe, was the first one to offer any-to-any swaps back 2 years ago, where they could use a stable coin as a routing asset. And the user who wanted to go from, I don't know, ETH to some other asset on a different chain, you would swap on the origin chain, bridge the stable coin, and swap again. So that flow has existed on the EVM land for quite some time now.
I also learned in watching some of the other interviews that you've had is that for the security, because we all know that the bridges in the past have always been a little bit vulnerable. And I know that your decentralized North Star and your design with this hub and spoke system that you've created is really in with high thoughts of trying to keep everybody safe. And so if we think about it, I think you've got the AXELAR in the center, and then all of these blockchains become part of the spokes. And I think if you can show that in a visual, maybe for people to understand, it becomes very clear as to maybe how some of that flow occurs.
Absolutely. So let me present my screen. And that's what you can see here on the screen is AXELAR in the middle, which is a blockchain connecting blockchains. And let me start by motivating why AXELAR was designed that way. Eri, as you mentioned, there were some security issues in the past with interoperability, billions of dollars being lost across dozens of hacks. And when we're starting AXELAR in 2020, there were all these projects that were claiming to be decentralized, right? And a lot of them even had some dashboards with some validator names. Of course, everything was closed source. No one could validate if the claims were true or not. But the vast majority of people, as you know, are not technical, and they just take these claims at face value. So a lot of these protocols ended up having, more than $1 billion in value secured. And inevitably, what happened is that, well, they were not decentralized. The founder was just holding the key in his back pocket, probably in some ledger. And when a lot of those single points of failure got compromised, billions of dollars were collectively lost, right? The centralization aspect was the number one cause of security issues. And back then we had to make a decision, which is like, do we want to spend 2 years to build a robust decentralized infrastructure that is going to prevent this very common attack vector? Of course, it was not really a decision point for us because as technical people, we're always going to do things right. But it was not the easiest because you do have to say, well, I'm not going to capture market share now. I'm going to do it later, right? But that's the mistake that a lot of these other projects did. They took shortcuts, they cut corners in order to go to market fast, while AXELAR spent years to do things the right way. So it's really, really important to not have a centralized point of failure, to have a decentralized network connecting chains. And we asked ourselves, what's the way to decentralize a validator set? Well, the only way we know is by launching a proof of stake network. And that's exactly what we did with AXELAR. AXELAR is a network. It has 75 validators. These are some of the biggest validators in the space, validating on Ethereum, some of the other big networks, some of them on XRPL as well. And it's all public information. And you can also see metrics that keep track of their uptime, how they're performing. If a validator is not performing well, they're going to make less rewards, right? So there's an incentive system that incentivizes validators to do things the right way. 75 validators today. The validator set has been growing over time and will keep growing in the future. And basically what this implies is that when you move a message from one chain to another, or you move an asset from one chain to another, you are secured by this validator set of 75, globally distributed, decentralized validators. And this is the key differentiator from some of the other solutions that allows AXELAR to be more robust than any centralized protocol. I personally aspire to is having as much decentralization as all of the other big networks we connect. And as other networks decentralize more, I think AXELAR will naturally decentralize more as well. But somehow there's a mint bug and the chain tries to mint $1 million worth of assets on 10 other chains. Well, the accountant is going to say, well, you only had 100 units. How are you trying to mint more? And the reason having a hub here is important is because if you had pairwise connections, you will not be able to have this accounting on a single source of truth, right? So a chain, even if you had pairwise accounting, that one chain could say, oh, I'm going to move 100 units here and 100 units here and 100 units here. With AXELAR, you will be able to say, well, you only have 100 to spend. You're not going to be able to bridge or print more than that. And in a world with multiple VMs, where we're going to start seeing VM bugs as well, and infinite mint bugs, all kinds of things are most likely going to go wrong. You do want to secure the rest of the ecosystem from any new chain you are adding, so you can isolate damage in worst case scenario. So this hub and spoke architecture has this security benefit. In addition to that, you also get some implementation benefits because when we add Solana or Sui or XRPL, those are all different VMs. And if you do pairwise connections, like pretty much everyone else who's doing interoperability in the space, you have to translate messages from XRPL to Sui, and then from XRPL to EVM, and from XRPL to Solana. With AXELAR, you do translation from XRPL to the AXELAR VM, and then you can translate again to the destination virtual machine, right? So you do the work once, and you can be compatible with the wider ecosystem. And there is a team in the AXELAR ecosystem that is working on a connection to Bitcoin. It's actually the same team, that's working on the XRPL connection. The nice thing about AXELAR now and having a blockchain is that different teams participate in the ecosystem and can contribute to different connections, right? So it's really becoming a decentralized ecosystem, not just on the validator network, but also on the connection layer, right? So anyone can build connections to any chain. It's not limited to a core team that is the only one that can do that. And that's just to insert like a recent announcement we did. We call this the Mobius development stack, where AXELAR, because it is a blockchain, you have a programmable interoperability layer where everyone can build connections. People will even be able to write contracts for their assets on AXELAR itself to add additional security measures. So it's really a fully programmable interoperability platform, unlike anything we've seen in the interoperability space.
Think about Sui, and they're in a brand new language, the Move language. Did they have any unique challenges, or was the integration with Sui any different than maybe you found with some of the others that have already been accomplished?
Great question. I'd say it's always hard when you do a new virtual machine. It's always hard to do it. Sui Move is easier to build with than the EVM, that's for sure. But when we're talking about security, Eri, it's always hard to do any integration, right? And bridging, as we talked about, billions of dollars lost in hacks. So no single integration is easy, but relatively to other integrations, yeah, I'd say like Move is a pretty good language to work with.
So the next one was talking about tokenization, because this is going to be a big thing in our space, and it looks like it's a great fit for blockchain, of course, and the real world assets that are being tokenized. It looks like treasuries are going to be really popular in the beginning. And I'm just kind of curious, in the very first, I can just remember when tokenization was first being discussed in the space, we had a lot of discussion about real estate. I don't know if you remember, but real estate was kind of like the first big use case people were talking about. And now it just feels like, and I could be wrong, but it just feels like that use case focus or spotlight has moved over to treasuries. Yeah, it seems like treasuries are kind of the hot thing. So I just want to hear from you. Is that true? Are they the hot thing right now? And other than real estate and treasuries, What do you think we're going to see in the future? What are some of the other use cases that will be really popular coming in the pipeline?
It's funny you mentioned real estate. I do remember, and it was one of the first, maybe even the first RWA tokenization use case. I remember when I was at Algorand, there were some companies doing that. I mean, to me, the reason why treasuries and just tokenize money, right? Tokenized savings accounts make sense is because that's the original promise of crypto, right? That's what Bitcoin was trying to do, banking the unbanked. And again, everyone in the world who doesn't have a bank account, like there's more people that don't have bank accounts than smartphones, right? Smartphones are like, pretty universal at this point. And we got to a point with stablecoins where anyone in the world can hold sound money on their phone. Now with treasuries, we take it one step further and allow everyone to hold a savings account, right? Because today, if you can get 4% on US treasuries, why have billions of people in the world that have a great reason to hold stablecoins, but then they still get inflated away? Of course, if you're in a country where the inflation is 100% a year, you're much better off holding a US dollar stablecoin. But again, why miss out on a savings account? So this is really the primitive that you are bringing on chain with tokenized treasury bills. And it's an extension of the original promise of crypto, right? So personally, I feel like if that's one thing that we accomplish with crypto and we do nothing else and we manage to get savings accounts in the hands of every single person in the world who wants to have them, I'll say crypto is a success. Of course, we aspire to do a lot more, but even if we just did this one thing, I'd be personally happy and I'd say, we're successful in crypto. Now, in terms of some of the other use cases, I will give kind of a boring answer, which is just reiterating what I was saying. I do think like money and like tokenization of savings accounts is the most interesting one. In the long term, though, everything is going to move on the blockchain, right? The whole financial system is going to move on the blockchain. In the medium term, maybe there's some private ledgers until like on-chain privacy, gets to a point where everyone can interact with it. But if we look at the history of technology, Eri, you've been, through various cycles, you're a technologist yourself, you know that open markets, like free markets, always remove inefficiencies. And the best technology on a long enough time horizon is going to dominate. So I have no doubt that, in 20, 30 years, all of the traditional financial infrastructure is going to be on chain, especially with technology moving so fast now, with artificial intelligence, everything becomes digital. So whoever does not integrate with digital technologies, first of all, will have so many inefficiencies that have to keep spending so much money in order to do things. But it's just not going to be composable with artificial intelligence, which is a fully digital technology, right? So there's so many forces driving us in the direction where all of TradFi will eventually move on the blockchain, including real estate, right? Like any kind of accounting, everything will move on chain.
That announcement with Ripple and Chainlink just came out. A lot of people were talking about it. It's going to give the price data for the RLUSD, and it gives the go ahead to make that really that stablecoin efficient and be able to work in DeFi. So I just want to hear your point of view, because I think everybody's really interested since that announcement was just made, and just hear you weigh in on anything that you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I think it's great. So the most important step for getting a stablecoin adopted in DeFi is just to go to the big applications and get integrated, right? Like Aave, you want to have Uniswap pools. Once you have these primitives, other DeFi developers can integrate with your asset, and that's how you create a flywheel and get adoption, right? So you do need to have some of the core primitives integrate in your asset. As part of getting integrated into lending protocols on Ethereum, you need to have a price oracle. Chainlink is the biggest service provider that offers oracles in the Ethereum ecosystem, so that's a very natural choice to use there. So applications on the EVM or Ethereum in particular that want price feeds for RLUSD will be able to do that through their price feeds. And just to give you a sense of why this is important, if you want to be able to get a loan on a money market like Aave, you need to have price feeds, right? Because let's say you're collateralizing your RLUSD to get a loan against some other asset. If the price of RLUSD falls, you want to be able to make sure that there is always enough collateral so that if something goes wrong, like in the borrower defaults, there's enough collateral to cover the position, right? And the lender does not lose money. So that's why price feeds are important. Well, for stable coins, I mean, RLUSD is always going to be fully backed, so this is not going to be a problem, but that's how DeFi protocols work, right? So everyone needs an oracle on that ecosystem, and Chainlink is the most widely adopted one. Of course, you need other things, right? When you want your asset to be integrated into DeFi, now there's so many different chains. You need interoperability, right? That's what we're working on for various assets on the XRPL, like XRP. So interoperability is a different tool, but you have all these different tools in the DeFi ecosystem, and you need to integrate all of them in order to successfully grow adoption for your assets. So TLDR is, Ripple with RLUSD, they're making the right moves to get RLUSD adopted. I'm sure, or actually, I don't know, but I imagine they will also want to go to Solana at some point. There for Oracle price, you have Pyth, which is another great team that's very widely adopted. And maybe if they go to the Move ecosystem, there's a different Oracle there, right? So every ecosystem has its own providers that are, widely adopted. And the goal is to get, I assume the goal is to get RLUSD integrated with all of them across ecosystems and grow the footprint of the asset.
I really want to talk about AI agents. I wrote down here just a few things that I know some of the agents will be doing for us in the finance sector, like analyzing markets. They'll also be analyzing social media sentiment. They'll be making suggestions for trading strategies. They're going to be able to do those same sort of suggestions for buying strategies, monitor market movements, do predictions, even identify sectors that are up and coming. And I think the list just goes on and on and on. But I would love to hear from you. What have you seen that's really looking interesting for the AI agents in the financial sector, or for any blockchain sector for that matter? Where are we going with this? How soon is it going to really be mainstream? Is it true that we're going to see more agents than humans on the blockchain? And will everybody have their agents working for them, doing customized work that will make our lives easier? I mean, is it crazy talk, or is it really going to happen?
I mean, it's actually happening. Most of the smart people I know, they're using agents already just to augment their capabilities. And let's talk about timeframes or 3 to 5 years, because after that, in 20 years, you listed a couple of things. Well, agents eventually will do everything. It's just impossible to predict what's going to happen, 20 years down the line. So let's stick to the next few years. I have a lot of trader friends. It's so much easier if you use AI to filter for information, right? So you can have an agent that's just looking through X or the internet, just picking up events and actually parsing what events are interesting for you, right? So and this just saves a lot of time for people in research industries. I'm reading a paper now, right? Sometimes I can just have an agent go through it, give me the key learnings, which sections I'm interested in this part, which section should I look at. I feel like especially for the younger generation, for kids these days, it's going to be so much easier to learn anything, even just programming, right? If you remember Back in the day, you just like, and you've been in the engineering space much longer than I have been. If you want to learn a language, like back in the day, you'd have to read a book, or if you wanted to debug something, you'd have to go like through all these different websites, like look through forum posts. It was just impossible. Now with AI, well, just ask it. It's gonna like point you to the right place or give you the answer, and that's it. It really accelerates the rate of learning and personal growth for all individuals, right? Of course, it will apply for individuals of all ages, but as any new technology, I think kids are gonna adopt much faster. And even if AI, doesn't replace or is not able to do research by itself, well, if you're a researcher and you can cut your innovation time by 50%, right? So if you want to generate a new research piece and you can do it in like 2 weeks instead of 4 weeks, or half a year instead of 1 year, it's really gonna accelerate the rate of adoption. And then you have compounding effects, right? Because research is gonna happen so much faster, but because it happens so much faster, AI is also gonna improve so much faster, and then it's gonna keep compounding. So it's really hard to build intuition around this because it's something that's never really happened in the real world, but like mathematically it makes sense, right? We augment our abilities, we learn faster, which means that we improve the technology faster, which means we learn even faster, and then like at that point, who knows what happens. So, but longer term discussion. In the near term, I do see a trend where anyone really who has an expertise at something will use an agent just to augment their capabilities. And then if you're a service provider, right, let's say you're a freelancer, right, doing something, you educate your agent like with your specific knowledge, right? You embed your like knowledge into the agent, and then that agent can help you provide services to other people. And maybe if you have an expertise in something, and then the agent of another person wants to tap into your expertise, they interact with your agent. And then if they want to make a payment to your agent, well, how are they going to do that? It has to be crypto, right? Because AI is a digital technology. It's going to be so much easier, so much cheaper and more composable. So that's, I say, my number one prediction, where in the next year or three, people are going to have these agents that are an extension of themselves and are providing services using your specific knowledge and your specific like capabilities. And then agents are going to interact directly and they're going to pay each other.
They're going to pay each other, you say?
Yes, yes. Because if the agent is the digital representation of your identity, right, and it has the knowledge, domain-specific knowledge that you have built up over many years, that knowledge, most people will want to keep private, and it's something they strive for, they work hard for, and they want to be able to provide, but still get paid for that knowledge, right? So if you need some information that only I own, your agent can just query my agent, and of course there's going to have to be
some sort of transaction, you're saying.
Exactly. And those things, like who knows how often those agents will interact and how they'll exchange information. There's no other technology in the space, especially if it's like micropayments that happen all the time. There's no other technology that can facilitate this. So crypto is a very natural playground for these agents.
So 1 million chains, how many agents does that make?
I'd say, what's the population of the world today? 8.2 million. But that's the thing with agents. I think there's going to be a point where agents will be able to interact with chains on behalf of the user. So the argument against many chains is that, well, it's going to be bad user experience. But with agents, like, they're not going to care how many chains there are, right? They're just going to move around the chains. Like, why do they care? Maybe they even launch their own chains, right, to have their own block space, and they don't have to pay fees to a global settlement layer. So AIs are not going to care about user experience. Of course, there's other domains like chain abstraction that also make the user experience better. So, we're even without the agents, we were headed to a multi-chain world with a lot of chains, but agents are not going to care about using multiple chains. It's the same thing to them. It's all bits. So
within the ecosystem of AXELAR, how many chains do you think there will be in that interoperable schematic of hub and spoke in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years?
Well, 10 years, 1 million is a goal to strive for. You can connect them, right? Because of the hub and spoke architecture we talked about, you can create a one-off connection to the chain, and that's it, right? So you can theoretically connect an unlimited amount of chains. If there's some theoretical limits of using a single chain, you can spin up a second version of AXELAR that connects to the existing AXELAR hub. So you could have a multi-hub ecosystem. But there are techniques to also aggregate transactions cross-chain. So like the system is built for scaling to that number of chains, and the hub and spoke architecture really works. So it's up to the minds of the developers, what they can imagine, what they can build, and as long as developers keep building chains, AXELAR will be there to connect them.
You think you'll be probably the biggest connector out there, I imagine.
AXELAR, what it's really good at, and what we've built the best-in-class infrastructure for, is this network that passes messages across other chains. But there are different layers of the stack, right? There's aggregation layers that aggregate different networks. Some other projects in the space you may have heard of, there's like Wormhole, there's Layer 0. These are pretty much like the only two other reputable interoperability players that have been around for a while. They both have their aggregation standards, right? And under those standards, you have to have secure networks. And sometimes they have more than one network, right? So what Lido did, which is the biggest asset in DeFi, is they used the standard that was initially created by the Wormhole team. It's an aggregation standard, and they use both the AXELAR and the Wormhole network under the hood to secure the asset. Ondo, which is one of the biggest, RWA issuers on chain, is using AXELAR with the Layer 0 framework, where under the hood they're secured by AXELAR network plus some of these other networks, right? So with AXELAR, we do want to do one thing and do it well. Building a robust decentralized network is very hard. It takes years, and we don't want to do too many things. Just do one thing well. I feel like specialization is important. And then we see some of these other frameworks that were initially competitive, also including AXELAR into some of their biggest customer instantiations. So really, my prediction is that no matter which standard wins on the higher level, on the high layer, AXELAR is going to be the most trusted network that is securing those standards. And that's really what we're striving for, making the most secure network. And no matter which standard win on the application layer, AXELAR is going to be part of that, right? So in that sense, yes, it is going to be the biggest connector, and it's going to connect as many chains as needed. Yeah, Eri, I didn't realize we've been speaking for so long. This was a wonderful conversation. We should probably do one more when we're close to the XRPL launch. From my side, speaking to the community, just thank you so much for welcoming me and AXELAR to the community. I've been really impressed with the community. I like very, technical. People try to understand things. It's been a pleasure to engage with everyone. I mean, let's do more of that as we get closer to launch. And maybe I'll just drop some links. Eri, I'll send you some links so that people can go in the comments and play with the AXELAR stack across different networks. And this is going to be the same front ends that they will be able to use to interact with AXELAR when the XRPL integration goes live, and they will be able to easily move their assets, from XRPL to other chains, but also more importantly, use XRP on the EVM sidechain to pay for gas, right? This is what AXELAR is facilitating, creating the XRP gas token on the EVM so that people can use the chain. So really, very excited to spend more time with the community. Super excited for the integration, and I mean, looking forward to engaging more with the community.
Yeah, I know that everyone is just as excited to have you as part of the ecosystem, because it's making the holders who have been in the XRP community a long time really anticipate all the new use cases that are going to come. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Eri, and very nice to talk to everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.